Hello, my name's Emily Morris. I've just recently finished my law degree, and I'm quite happy to be here, but at the same time I'm a bit scared, so you have to take it easy with me. I'm here today to talk to you about the liberation of change and how bad experiences can actually be some of the most positive experiences. And if you haven't already, I don't want to upset you, but every single person in this room will have a bad experience, and you have to learn how to adapt to it and then what skills you can get out of it. And one of the experiences I'll be talking to you today about my parents' divorce. And at the time, it was quite like, at the time I didn't think there was going to be a way out of it, but it actually changed my life for a positive. And you don't have to answer these questions, but how many of you today have had decisions made for you already? And how many of you today have been ignored in decisions that affect your personal, academic and home life? And how many of you today have been affected by other people's actions? And now, can you imagine being a child whose voice is ignored when their parents are separating? This is me as a child, with my sisters, and I'm the oldest one. So here's me when I'm 16, studying away, and my main goal is to get to university. And then, the day my parents decided to separate was the 9th of April 2012. And at the time, we were living in Cambridge. As you could tell from my accent, I'm originally from Birmingham. And on this day, my father had returned from travelling, and he'd been away for 2 months, and we hadn't really had that much contact with him. And then it was really weird, because he came back and he said to my mum, I want to get a divorce. And he said it in front of me and my sisters, and it sounds really weird. He actually recorded my mum's reaction, which was really weird. But of course, my mother didn't take this too kindly, and I mean, I don't know about you. And she got arrested for domestic violence. And I don't agree with violence, but I do understand why she did what she did. And then my mother then relocated back to Birmingham to live with my grandparents, and my father then decided to change the house locks, which left me and my other sister out on the streets. And then I had to adapt straight away and find a new way to live and provide for myself, which is quite difficult because I'd only been in Cambridge for 6 months, so I hadn't built that support network for myself. But when they separated, I was quite relieved because for 10 years, from the age of 10, I always knew they were going to separate. I was just waiting for it to happen. And as the relationship between my parents was over, so was the family unit, which, whilst it was sad, it also was quite freeing because I'd hit rock bottom and there was nowhere else I could go. I could only rebuild my life. And I remember being in the garage of the house, frantically ringing my friend, asking for a place to stay for the night. And I also remember providing a witness statement for my mother and being told by the police that it's quite rare for children of parents to give statements. Actually, it's quite funny because my mum got let out of the police station at midnight, and I was getting drunk with my friends. The police rang me and was like, "Oh, we've let your mum out," and I was like, I was too happy, I was too drunk anyway. And I also remember packing one suitcase of my belongings, not knowing at the time that was all I would be able to get out of the house. And if I'd known at the time, then maybe I would have packed different items, maybe photographs instead of clothes. And having limited belongings is quite liberating, because it frees you of any of the useless rubbish that you don't need. It also changes your perspective on life, because you realise life is a lot less about materialistic items, but a lot more about having stability and feeling safe and having that support network. And so for 2 months, I lived between friends' houses, and one friend 4 days a week, the other friend 3 days a week, and at the same time I was working 16 hours a week at Greggs the Baker's, as well as studying for my A-levels. So this is at the time when my parents were separating, and I was quite homeless, but at the same time I was quite happy. And my father often rang me being abusive and threatening. And the night before, I'm a massive Harry Potter fan, so I went to the last Harry Potter premiere, and you're allowed to take home these big billboards. It meant quite a lot to me. But the night before one of my exams, my father sent me a text message of it in 4 pieces, saying, you've got a piece for every wall now. And then he sent me quite a lot of text message pictures as well, with my bookcase in bits and my bed in bits. So, of course, I did an all-nighter, worrying what I was going to do. And then the following day, I walked in to do my exam, and it was quite clear I had no sleep. And I had to sleep on my teacher's floor a couple of hours before the exam just to get refreshed. And my mother then did relocate back to Cambridge, and I moved back in with her. However, my mother's mental health drastically declined, which resulted in a mental breakdown on Boxing Day. And she left us actually in the Cambridge shopping centre, which again was quite difficult, trying to get a lift back on Boxing Day. So yet again, I remember frantically ringing around friends asking for help. I also remember my sister having an asthma attack because she was that scared about what we were going to do. And I also remember ringing my dad as a last resort, who wasn't actually in the area, he was in Birmingham, asking for a lift. But then he asked his girlfriend to pick us up, who we had never met before. So as you could probably guess, it was quite an awkward car ride home. So for 2 months, I became the carer for my younger sister, whilst my mother sought treatment in Birmingham. And I also increased my hours at Greggs the Baker's to help pay for food and other daily outgoings. And I did sometimes go without lunch to ensure my sister could eat. And my parents finally got divorced at the end of my first year of university. I was quite happy that I was over and done with. And throughout the entire process, I tried to get support on the internet, but all I found was quite negative news articles saying I was more likely to commit crime, drop out of education, and even develop diabetes as a result of my parents' separation. And at that time, my goal was to get to university. So as you can imagine, having all these negative articles thrown at you, it does take you back. So the lack of support annoyed me quite a lot, because as I was just into a new situation, I didn't know how the process of divorce would entail, or why my parents acted the way they did, like why my mum had the mental breakdown and why my dad was violent. But then I asked myself, what did I want support with, and what was I worried about? And do I even need support to have my voice heard? And do I have a right to have my voice heard? Because my parents' divorce was between them. The way I look at it, I'm an object of their marriage. I'm not involved in their marriage. But it really depends on what you think and what you need and what you want personally. So I found the experience of divorce quite liberating, and it changed my perspective on life, because I realised that it's perfectly acceptable to have your voice heard and to say no to any decisions that you don't want, because I used to be the type of person that would say yes to everything, even if I didn't want to do it. And there's a quote, if you don't like something, change it. And if you can't change it, change your attitude. And this quote reflects my whole experience during my parents' separation. And I can't change my parents' separation, and I wouldn't want to. I wish I could change the way it happened. However, I could change how I feel and how I adapt to the family situation. And there are 2 sides to divorce and how it can change your game of life. You can either let it destroy you or make it positive for you. And the best part of this whole experience was that it was completely freeing. Having to restart from scratch with my belongings and adapt to a new family situation, a new house, and even a new city, because we moved back to Birmingham, meant there was a new baseline standard where I could simply rebuild my way up. I have lost a lot, I am aware of that, but it allowed me to put all my energy into the only thing that mattered to me, which was my education. And I recently did a year abroad in Hong Kong, which I would not have had the confidence to do. It was only because when my parents separated, I was on my own, and I had to provide for myself, so I had the skills already. And now I am handling my dissertation, which is actually about divorce. And during the divorce, I didn't doubt myself because I knew I would get into university. And I don't mean that to appear cocky, but I had an inner self-belief and I ignored all the critics. And I did have massive self-doubt. I still do, but not to the extent that I used to have. And the divorce taught me that I have everything I need to survive anyway. You don't need materialistic items. I have my sisters and my mother. I've got the air in my lungs and the clothes on my back. And a little self-doubt, a little self-belief, goes a little way. Not self-doubt, we don't want that. Had my parents still been together, I really don't think I would have made it to university. And divorce allowed me to learn things about myself that I would not have learned anyway. I learned how strong I am and how I know that whatever experience comes my way, I've got the skills there. Although I have lost a lot, and it does make it difficult to get my parents in a room together. And I only have one photograph of the 5 of us from my childhood because my father had destroyed all the photographs. And I do find it quite difficult to trust people, but it's a process that I'm learning to improve. And there were many occasions where I became overwhelmed by the situation, that I could barely get myself out of bed some mornings. When I was staying at my friend's house, her mum literally 1 week had to drag me out of bed. It was like, you're going to school, you're going to do your A-levels. But the fear of the uncertain was useless and is useless. All it did was give in to the voice in my head and that self-critic telling me that it wouldn't be okay, but I've hit rock bottom. I just needed to learn how to rebuild. And I am complex, but we all are in this room. Every single one of us in this room is a complex person. And whilst fear can be overwhelming, you have to give it your best shot, because if you don't, the only person you'll let it down is yourself. If you let yourself down and you don't put your best into it, it's not going to affect anybody else but you. And you shouldn't give in to the fear, because it's just a black hole. It just sucks the energy out of you. And it does restrict you, and it places limitations on your abilities, and it doesn't do you any favours. And divorce changed my game of life for the better. You should try every experience, because one day you will wish you did. I'm glad I did the year abroad in Hong Kong, even though at the time it scared the life out of me. But I'm really glad I did it. And from this experience, I have found my passion. And in 2014, I wrote and published the only support booklet available for young people when their parents separate. And the NHS and schools in various parts of England are currently using it. And here I am, last year, with the Minister for Family Justice, and here's an email saying from the solicitor asking me to speak at their interval. And I used this experience to create change for others and help them change their game of life. And there is potential for everyone to create change. So I do leave you with some questions. And why do we wait for bad experiences to change our game of life? Why don't you just do what you're going to do? For years, I've wanted a Harry Potter tattoo, so when I graduate, I'm going to get myself a Harry Potter tattoo. And I believe it's quite stagnatant to wait for bad experiences to give you energy to motivate your life. And that's it. Well, thank you very much. It wasn't as scary as what I thought it was going to be. Well, thank you.